We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I'm very excited to welcome two guests on our interview series, Ciulla, President of U.S. Operations and Cross-Border Services at Comrise, and Diana Fernandez, Marketing Associate at Comrise. Chris, Diana, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourselves for our audience, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you both answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, Christina, thanks for having us. So my name is Chris Ciulla. My pronouns are he and him. So I'm a native New Yorker. I grew up here in New York, the son of a fireman. My mom was a bookkeeper in the labor union. And my dad was determined to have me be a fireman. And he used to bring me to the firehouse as a little kid. And I used to get jobs around the firehouse. But in the summer of the 7th grade, that all changed. I got my first job and I got a paper route. And I'm 51, so that was back when you delivered papers and you knocked on people's door to collect for papers. And I made $30 a week selling to about 30 to 35 homes. And I quickly realized there were a lot of houses on the block I didn't deliver the paper to. So I went to my boss and said, hey, how do you sell this so I can get more people to buy the newspaper from us? And she was so excited. She couldn't wait to teach me how to do it. And I went and started knocking on doors and I got another 30 customers and I got that up to $60 a week. And soon it was $70 a week because I was making tips because I was doing a great job, protecting people's paper and getting it to them on time. And a lot of my customers really liked me. It was then I learned a really valuable lesson and I learned something about myself. The thing I learned about myself was that I wanted to be in sales, that I wanted to do something sales related. And I knew it at an early age. And the second thing I learned was my first work lesson, that money equals freedom. So you can't pick your happiness, but money gives you choices. And, in 8th grade, I liked this girl in my class and, I invited her out on a date and I didn't have to ask dad's permission or mom's permission or for money. I just called a cab, went to her house, picked her up and took her to the movies. And that feeling of freedom was the most empowering thing for a young person who was 14 years old. So, I knew early on I wanted to be in sales and I wanted to be doing something where I could influence the outcome.
I'm Diana. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the marketing associate at Comrise. When I was younger, there were two things that I wanted to be. The first one's a little bizarre. I wanted to be a meteorologist and give the weather news on TV, except I realized that I'm not good at science and that's probably not going to be my career. And then the other thing was something within video. So when I was 10 years old, I made my YouTube channel and I begged my dad to buy me a webcam. And so I would lock myself in my room, do not disturb sign on my door, and I'd film all day long. I would edit for hours on end. So it's kind of funny because now as a marketing associate, I do a lot of video and everything's just come full circle and I just love my job. So yeah.
I love both of those answers. One, because we love to see financial freedom. And two, when people asked me that question as well, I also wanted to be on TV as a television host. So I definitely relate to that as well. I want to ask around kind of the we culture and the Comrise values here. Tell me about what we culture means and what are the core values that comprise this.
Sure, Christina. So We Culture is actually based on a book written by Chris. And the premise of We Culture is that core values drive behavior within the workplace. So those core values are, one, be positive. So entering every single workday with a positive mindset, which becomes infectious to other colleagues, and always saying we can. Leading to the second core value, be collaborative. People who say we can, they can usually get a lot done and work towards a common goal. That leads to our third core value, be honest and ethical. And when we work together as a team, we want to be honest with each other. We want to be transparent and we want to leave the door open for any feedback from colleagues. And then our fourth and final core value, which is my personal favorite, is be the spark. So if we're honest with each other and we're transparent, then we can welcome new ideas from our colleagues and we encourage everyone to share all of their ideas. Chris, I don't know if you have a core value that you like? I know mine's be the spark, but what's yours?
It's really hard to choose because I'm pretty passionate about our core values. My favorite one is be positive, because I think that's the spark where everything begins. If people start by facing a challenge or starting their day by saying we can, you can usually get a lot done. And that's really what it's all about, right? So that feeds into collaboration, it feeds into an honest work environment, and then it encourages people to share innovative ideas. So be positive is my favorite. And that's just who I am every day. I bring my smile to work every day and my energy that says we can do it every day.
Be the spark, bring that positive attitude, be collaborative. And I definitely a proponent that everybody is responsible, should have that ownership mentality to create places where everybody can succeed, no matter where you sit in the organization, if it's day one, if it's year 5. But I also think that managers, executives, and leaders have a special responsibility too to be those culture carriers. What is the unique role, in your opinion, of the president or executives to really contribute to a company's culture?
This is a great question. And, I think it goes without saying that executive leaders are responsible to live and breathe the core values and lead by example, right? So knowing what those core values are and understanding what those core values are, citing them as examples when you're making decisions with your team and your colleagues is really important to reinforcing those core values. For example, sometimes when making a decision, we also filter through something we have as the 4-win principle. That means and there's 4 C's to that: candidate wins, client wins, colleague, that's me and Diana, right? And Comrise wins. So we try and filter every decision through that lens, right? So when we're making decisions, we're usually citing our core values and we're usually citing our 4-win principle to do that. The second thing that we do as executive leaders is, if we're doing a good job as a team, we're probably growing the business and we have to invite other people to join us. So this is where hiring comes in and becomes critical. We have to hire leveraging our core values and core qualities that we want from people that join us, and have those in mind before skill set and before accomplishments, because you can't teach core values and core qualities or core competencies, but you can teach a skill, right? So we usually hire with core values in mind, and that's how we support our corporate culture. We make sure that the people coming in share our values. I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I actually totally agree to what you said. And I think Comrise has created a culture where we set everybody up for success. And thanks to leadership like Chris and even our VP Michael, they really allow us to thrive in the environment that we're in. And again, keeping those core values in mind and keeping our 4-win principle in mind.
I think it's really important not to just have the core values in place or have them on the kitchen wall, the virtual kitchen wall as well, and then you never see them again. But really, Chris, what you were talking about, and Diana as well, in terms of the candidate experience, how you're hiring folks, and really citing them as reasons why you're making decisions as executives is really important. When we're talking about today's workplace, it's changing on a regular basis. And a lot of folks are adopting this hybrid model as well, where you're sometimes in the office and not. Chris, you and I were talking about kind of the day that folks come in as well. Can you share an example of how you're intentionally creating really successful and thriving hybrid workplaces for folks who are listening as well, who are adopting that same model?
Absolutely. So actually back in 2021, when companies were toying around with the idea of whether they wanted to go back to the office full-time 5 days a week, stay remote, or adopt that hybrid workspace, Comrise leadership actually decided that that wasn't a decision that they wanted to make on their own. They didn't want to make a biased decision that wouldn't keep the colleagues' needs in mind. And so the solution to that was to have an open conversation with colleagues. So we actually sat down, we talked about what we expected, what we wanted, what would work for us, and eventually came to the conclusion that we would go back to the office on Tuesdays as our face-to-face in-person collaboration days. And the rest of the days we would work from home. And this helped us prioritize that work-life balance that we really, really thrived on while producing those results for our candidates, clients, colleagues, and Comrise as a whole. Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add, considering that you were the leadership that really allowed us to make that decision as a collective.
I'm particularly proud of our colleagues for that moment because it was a hard decision to make and people have a lot of opinions. There are a lot of people who are forced to work from home that don't like working from home. Working from home is not for everybody, especially if you have small kids that were trapped home and you were homeschooling. It's hard, right? And then there are people who adjusted their work balance lives to being from home and they were very productive at home, right? So we made a deal with our colleagues, right? We listened to their feedback. We let them choose a work schedule that worked for everybody. And then we sat down and made a deal. And the deal was if we can keep productivity at a level that we're looking for, that we would collaborate and give them the work schedule that they need so they could have the work-life balance that they got used to during COVID. And our team really shined and came together with this. They collaborated on the day. So we're all there together on that day and we're all happy to have that day and happy to see each other on that day. And then we all get that work-life balance, myself included. I adjusted my own life and changed the way I balance work and my personal life because of COVID. So we all got what we want. It was a real win-win.
It definitely sounds like a win-win, and hearing that employee feedback, taking that not one size fits all approach for folks as well, recognizing not everybody wants to work from home as well. It sounds like you both and a lot of folks at Comrise as well are creating a really best-in-class company culture. Of course, there are macroeconomic things and things that people cannot control too, and a lot of questions we get, especially right now, is around the talks of an impeding recession, and tech companies are going through pretty massive and very unfortunate layoffs as well. Pretty direct question, but has this impacted your strategy or business planning at all?
So when you talk about recession, it depends on who you're listening to and what cross currents in the economies you listen to.
Mhm.
Unemployment's really low, but inflation's high, right? You take a look at things like the stock market. The stock market has been dropping, right? So the economy has shrunk a couple of quarters, which is the technical definition of a recession. So we take a look at is what's going on. For our clients, this has changed the way they hire, right? They're starting to look at how they hire, how often they hire. They're putting off some hiring plans. There have been some quiet layoffs among some of the bigger companies, right, that haven't been so public, right? But for us, our strategy changes. Some companies are counter-cyclical with recessions, some industries. So what we're doing is making sure that we can still represent our candidates to the companies that are hiring, that are meeting the demands that a recession faces. And we're making sure that our team, we're collaborating with our colleagues to find out where that business is, to understand how we provide service to that business, and to make sure that we have the candidate base and the people that we can place with those clients to meet their demand, their hiring demands. And I think it has changed our strategy a lot. We've had to manage the message to candidates. For instance, many companies have gotten back to the traditional hiring cycle. While the market was hot, they started skipping steps and there'd be a 2-step hiring process. Now it's more back to a 3 or 4-step hiring process. So collaboration, being honest about what's happening in the market with our team, and being honest with our candidates about the changes, and then targeting the right audience, has been at the focus of our change in strategy. So we've definitely changed based on the economic terms. And I think it depends on who you listen to about a recession, but I think the market has definitely slowed down in the past 6 months. I don't know if anything to add to that.
I fully agree with you, Chris. I want to point out the whole thing with being honest with colleagues. Chris, I tell you every day how much we appreciate you for your honesty. But core value number 3 is be honest and ethical. And even with topics that are hard, like recession planning, Chris never keeps us in the dark. So I just want to make that clear, and that we really appreciate the transparency in workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. People can tell when you are being authentic or not, and really being transparent about the realities of what's happening or people's fears, and the conversations you're continuing to having and setting those expectations. We were talking about how COVID and the pandemic has really made us think about work-life balance and the role of work in our lives as well. Another question we have coming up too is around that re-engagement of current employees. How are you thinking about engaging colleagues who are either thinking about quitting, quiet quitting, or passively in the stage of thinking about, work in a different way?
Well, we try our best, and I hope there's nobody in our organization that's quiet quitting. I think we need to talk about what the real quiet quitting came from. And it's when companies went to their how we're going to reengage you going back to work schedules. Many large companies were dictating how that schedule would look, and they were telling people to come back to work. Some of the companies are in New York City where people were getting back on the train, maybe commuting an hour and a half to go back to the office each way after being home for so long and having that work-life balance, right? So that was really challenging for people. So what happens is when people feel like their opinions aren't taken into consideration or their needs aren't taken into consideration, if they don't have a choice, they'll quietly quit and do the minimum to get by. If they do have a choice, they'll actively quit and leave your organization. Some people will develop resentment and harbor resentment, might become what's called actively disengaged, where they will actively work against the company and create gossip and cliques and slow down the process and slow down things that are happening in an organization. For us, how do we engage that? How do we address that? And it really goes back to what Diana was talking about. It's just that transparency and honesty, right? We do have needs for the business. We do want to grow the business. We do want to engage our colleagues face to face to promote that harmony in the environment and that camaraderie. But we also want to take feedback from them on what they need and find the balance, right? And even when people don't get exactly what they want, if they really truly feel like they're being heard, and if they really feel like you're engaging them and listening to them, and that you have reasons why you're making the decisions that you're making, they'll remain engaged and they'll trust you and they'll believe in you. And that's the most important thing to me, that as a leader, that we can create an environment where people believe in us and trust in us. And when people believe in you and trust in you, they're giving you their best. And then that best is reflected out to your customers, right? Take care of your employees and the customers get great service by default. And that's something that we live by here at Comrise.
I love that. I think trust is something that is built over time and in those day-to-day actions as well. And your work relationship is the same as any other relationship too, where you need to have those meaningful actions behind it as well. We've been talking a lot about transparency and communication, but I don't think it could be underscored enough, or more examples can't be provided too for folks who are listening as well. In that same environment, there's bound to be changes. The workplace is very dynamic. How are you thinking about effectively and transparently communicating those changes when you have folks coming into the office and also working remotely?
So one of the key things is organization, and then, just maintaining an open space, for that communication. So for example, I work with our marketing team lead, Erica, and we love to stay organized through the use of agendas. And this really helps us to communicate with each other on the tasks we're working on, anything we should keep in mind. And we also have very human interactions with each other. It's not like, we meet on a meeting and then we get right into work. It's usually like, so how did your weekend go? What was the highlight of your weekend? How are you doing? And having those human interactions with each other, that makes all the difference. And even for face-to-face interaction, like every Tuesday, we have an operations meeting where our remote colleagues will dial in and anyone who's in the office will be present. And this is the time where we communicate any changes that are happening within our workplace. If there are new hires that we're going to introduce to each other, if there is anything new in the industry, any changes. So it's just kind of maintaining that communication with your colleagues, but also adding that human connection to it that makes all the difference. Chris, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, I do actually. So the best question I've ever learned to ask in business, and it's served so well, especially during COVID when we've been isolated from each other. Instead of asking people about the deal they closed or the tasks they're working on, I usually like to start with a question that's, how are you doing? I like asking that question of people. I like getting authentic answers. I like when people tell me when they're not doing okay or something's going on, because it's honest, right? And when people go right into their tasks, I sometimes stop them and say, hey, Diana, I didn't ask for an update on your project. I wanted to know how you're doing. How are you doing? Right? And and people give you answers, right? If you really ask and you're really asking in a way where you really want to hear those answers. And I find that people, when you show people that you care and it's truth, it's the truth and it's authentic, that people will engage, right? And they'll, and that appreciation and respect goes up too. I mean, I love it when, Diana picks up the phone and calls me and we're working on something and she'll start off to, how are you? She'll ask me how I'm doing. Or even more so, sometimes I'm not always at my best, right? I try to be, I'm human, right? Every once in a while, one of the colleagues will pick up that I'm a little preoccupied or something on my mind. And sometimes I'll get the G chat. People are like, hey man, you all right? How you doing? Right? So they're picking it up from me. So we're getting it, we're doing it for each other. And it's actually being there for your colleague, right? And allowing them to do that. So I think it's really important. I think it's something that most leaders miss. They think that helping their people win is helping them through their task. But COVID taught us that people had other things on their mind and other anxieties on their mind beyond just their job.
Absolutely.
It's impossible for any one human being to be on 24/7 and be at 100% and their best. And again, people can tell when you are asking a genuine question and then waiting and actively listening for an authentic answer too. And have you created the space in the relationship to be honest as well and have that psychological safety. I know we talked about executives and leaders as well. I think we've all heard the phrase, people don't leave companies, they leave managers or they stay for that reason as well. How are you thinking about resourcing and enabling specifically those people managers to model your core values by people?
So the first thing I believe that you need to do is empower your leaders, right? So they need to be empowered to perform the function of their job without micromanagement. So you need to create an environment where they have very clear direction on what's expected and what to do and how to do it. And then they're empowered to reflect the core values up and down the organization. I believe that those middle managers are the most important people in the organization. They're more important than anyone else because they're the link between the executive level of the organization and the colleagues, right? So if someone really needs to reflect those core values, it's them because they're reflecting it in two directions, right? So they need to make that part of everything they're doing every day. And very often frontline supervisors are managing transactions at the task level, right? Or projects at the task level. So that's where the rubber really meets the road. And those managers have to be engaging those core values and our 4-win principle and the decisions that they're making with their colleagues, right? To reinforce those core values. And even Diana could be in a call with me or any other colleague and just say to me or anybody else on the call in the organization, if we're not reflecting the core values, and we kind of joke because it's right behind us. It's like, hey, come on, man, don't make me tap the sign. Come on, get in the right headspace. We got to do this. we kind of make it fun. We make it a joke. We're kidding, but we're not, kind of thing. So it's just such a, when you're embedding your core values into your organization that way, your middle management team, that layer of supervisors and managers and directors, they become critically important. So it's interesting for us and fun.
Yeah.
I like that too. And just a constant reminder of the values and empowering folks to really leverage that as a framework for conversations, whether they're easy, whether they're a little bit constructive as well. And I think that's always a good thing to have too, in terms of a framework. We've been talking a lot about big changes at Comrise and also in the workplace overall. If the pandemic has taught us anything as well, business as usual is out the window. Nobody has a crystal ball. So a lot of innovation has been happening. Can you tell me a little bit about if you have innovated in any way or iterated on a project over the past 3 years? What did you test or iterate on, and what was the final result?
Sure. So actually, just a few months ago, our team over in China, they built out a brand new website. It was beautiful, it was modern, it was sleek, super easy to navigate. And my colleague Eric and I decided, okay, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna replicate this? But how will we add our own twist to it? And it was a pretty tight deadline with the project. So there was a lot of trial and error with it, along with revamping our whole brand. And because Comrise operates in the US, China, and Southeast Asia, our priority was to maintain that brand cohesiveness and to stick by our One Comrise initiative that would translate well in the US, China, and Southeast Asia as a whole. So we went through some trial and errors between, do we use stock photos? Do you use photos of our team? Is there any marketing material that we'll need to create to put on our landing pages that will support the services that we offer? And just a few obstacles along the way, a lot of learning lessons. But at the end of the day, it all came down to the end result. And when we reflect back on it now, we're like, wow, we went through all of that and we were so, so proud of the end result. And we received great feedback, from internal colleagues and even people in our external network as well. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
It's just, it's a good overall effort. And when you're an international company, you're collaborating across, a 12-hour time difference and sometimes a language barrier, business culture differences, right? I think the thing that we keep in mind and part of our we culture is that when we're dealing with people from China, I don't see Chinese people. I see people. They just happen to be from China. We have a lot more in common than we don't. And we have to focus on things we have in common so we can get things done together. And then the things we don't have in common become fun things we have to learn about each other, right? So I was particularly proud of the effort that they made and the work that they did working with a new leader in China through a project that was difficult and had a language barrier and had a time differential and a hard deadline. And it was very, very carefully and thoughtfully managed, leveraging our core values and our corporate culture.
Yeah, absolutely. We always get questions too around the asynchronous collaboration, especially for global organizations. So I think that is a good example to share as well. We are nearing our time together, so I only have 2 more questions left, but and consistently changing and getting feedback from folks. I'm sure you both, and myself included, are learning every day. What was one of your last learning moments?
My last learning moment was how important corporate culture is when you really have your back against the wall. COVID, if you absolutely learned through COVID when you had to change on a dime, like in March 17th in New York, when all the white collar employees had to be told to work from home on a dime, right? You learned how effective and how strong your organizational and corporate culture was right then and there. And if you didn't have a strong culture, you found out pretty quick. And I learned that our corporate culture can endure and that we were able to retain employees, and we were able to help them through a difficult time. So I really learned I always knew corporate culture was critical, but I learned the valuable lesson, just how important it was and how important it was to the colleagues that we had and maintained and kept our focus on our organizational culture through a difficult time.
Yeah, I totally agree with Chris. Christina, I graduated in 2020 in my living room at the height of the pandemic. And it wasn't until that I came to Comrise that I realized just how important company culture is. It's really easy for someone to just kind of open their laptop up, sign on, clock in, and, work is work, and then repeat the cycle the next day. But here, it's not like that. It's, connecting with your colleagues, and that culture really influences the way that you work and makes your work better. And at the end of the day, the people that create the culture is the colleagues. We ultimately create that culture.
I definitely agree with that as well. Culture is so important to an organization and needs to be cultivated in that intentional way with meaning behind it. Is there anything, Christiana, that I didn't ask that you want to share with folks listening or underscore any key takeaways about the many things we discussed today?
The most important takeaway that I would give to anyone listening about organizational culture is to keep in mind that if you're a colleague or a leader, the people who create the culture, and we culture, I wrote this title chapter 2, who creates the culture? The answer is we all do, okay? I brush my teeth in the morning. I'm trying to figure out how today is gonna be a little bit better than yesterday for the colleagues that I'm working with. That's what I'm thinking. And some mornings I wake up on the wrong side of bed. I'm married, I have college-age kids. There's a lot of mayhem that goes on in your personal life, I'm sure, like everybody else, right? But I remind myself of what my role is in the organization. And the first bullet point of my job is help my people win. And the best way I can do that is be in the frame of mind to do it. And that means, how can I make today a little bit better than yesterday? And it all starts there. If you go to work saying, Another day, you see people post on social media, oh, it's only Tuesday, or thank God it's Friday. If you go to work with that attitude, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Work will not be a good place to go to. But if you go with the attitude to today will be better than yesterday, and you get all the colleagues in the organization doing it, people want to come to work. And that's what we want. We want people to want to come to work. We get people jobs for a living, right? So we want them to want to go to work. So we reflect our core values, not only internally, but we reflect them out in our advertising to our market. So our customers can see what our core values are and our 4 principle are. And it kind of sets a standard for what they can expect from us going forward, and makes us perform at a higher standard because of it. So I'm brushing my teeth every day, figuring out today's going to be better than yesterday. And I would tell anyone listening, or ask anyone listening, who did you bring to work today? Ask yourself that when you look in the mirror and get ready in the morning.
That is a great call to action to top off our conversation. Diana, Chris, thank you so much for spending some time with me this afternoon and for being guests on Reimagining Company Culture.
Thank
you so much.
Of course. And as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.